Right, so let's look at the last question in this question 25. Remember, we're working with the study guide, the New Era study guide. The question 25 is on the web, and you can download it plus the memo. And these are a set of videos in which I'm trying to help you to answer these questions. So let's have a look at question 4. And they say to us the directors want to raise more funds. Now remember, we did a whole video clip on funds and where companies can raise funds. And we basically said there were two parts. Selling shares to the shareholders who are your owners, or you could take out loans. And the question is saying to you that they want to raise these funds for expansion. So they want to expand the business, hopefully to generate greater profits. And they're asking you, should they issue shares or should they raise a loan? In other words, again, this. Grade 12s, remember, this overlaps with your financing activities in your cash flow. This is where you get your financing from. Now, if we go and we take a look up top here, we'll need to first of all look at the fact that we've got a debt-equity ratio. Now, remember, the debt-equity ratio measures your risk. The higher your loans, the higher your risk, because those loans have to be repaid together with interest. Now, if we compare and look at the trend, there's been an increase from 0.3 to 0.6, which seems to imply that they've already increased their loan. So they've got a higher debt than they did last year. However, this is still a low-risk company. The equity is still much bigger than what the loans are. Now, as we discussed in the video, there is nothing wrong with being a high risk, as long as that capital is working for you and you are getting a return. And so this is where the return on total capital employed comes in. Now, learners, you need to make sure that you understand there's a difference between the return on total capital. Total capital will be all the shares and the loans. Compare that to the return on the shareholders' equity, which is only the shareholders' money. Now, please make sure you understand the difference and that you know how to work out the formula for those. Now, in this case over here, using all our capital, the share money plus the loans, we will notice again that there has been a decrease. The trend has been a decrease in our return on total capital employed. We were making 30% last year. We now reduced to 26%. So despite increasing the risk, we actually have decreased our return. And obviously that is not good. However, we can't stop at that point and we can't say it's definitely not good. We need to then, the third facet that we have to bring in is to look at the interest rate on these loans. What are we borrowing this money at? Last year we were borrowing at 12%, and again, the interest rates have gone up. So we're actually borrowing at a higher percentage. But what is important is we need to compare these two together. This company is borrowing a certain amount of money and paying 14%, but it is generating an income of 26%. And therefore, we talk about this as having positive gearing. There is a positive outcome as a result of this borrowing. Now, not to confuse the word gearing with geared. A highly geared company would be a company that borrows a lot more than they have in shares. This is not. This is a low geared company because the loans are less than the equity. In other words, geared is talking about the risk. But although we're low geared and it has increased, the important factor here is that we've got positive gearing. We're borrowing at 14 and we're getting a return of 26. So while the return has actually decreased, while the interest rate has actually increased, we are still generating enough to justify that loan. So, does that mean, remember, should we take out an extra loan now for the expansion? Well, we hope that the business has done the research sufficiently to know that this expansion is going to bring in higher returns. As long as that's the case, and as long as the net profit starts to increase, then the return over here is also going to increase. You've got the capacity to borrow extra money. There is still positive gearing, but you need to equate that with what your trends are in the future. Now, generally, most businesses would prefer to take out a loan, despite the fact that that will increase the risk and it brings in capital expenditure. The advantage is that after a period of time, that loan will be repaid, and those increased profits will then be shared amongst amongst the original shareholders, so they will all earn a higher dividend. On the other hand, this business could very well sell more shares in the business, providing they've got shares that they haven't sold all their authorized shares at this particular point in time. The benefit of shares is that there is no interest and you're not increasing your risk factor. So for people that don't like taking risks, they would probably prefer to have the owners investing in the business. However, in the long term, hopefully this is generating a larger profit, but that larger profit is going to be shared amongst more shareholders. So you can see they've got to weigh up the option. The loans bring in risks. The loans, there needs to be positive gearing, which there is in this case. Shares, on the other hand, will take away that risk, and it will also increase your capital and hopefully bring up more profits. But it's what is the outcome in the long term. Now, in a question like this, they ask you, should they raise shares or loans? You can choose either one. You can say, I would choose shares because there's no interest, because I won't be increasing the debt. And I've already increased the debt here, and that already has resulted in a reduced return on total capital employed. And remember, at all time, quoting the figures. Or you could answer and say, I think the business should rather raise a loan, despite the fact that the return has gone down on the total capital employed, and despite the fact that there is an increase in the risk, there is positive gearing. So at this point in time, this company can justify taking out an extra loan. Now, learners, I'm making a big point about this because I want you to realize that in all of these questions, you generally can answer one way or the other. You must decide which way you're going to go. Spell the positives of the way you're going, but then compare to the other method. You can't ignore it. But you can't say to a business, answer this question and say, I would sell shares, and then give a whole long story, and then go on and say, but I also would take out loans because of this, this, this. No, you're wasting time. There's only 8 marks on this thing. You're not going to finish. So choose which one you're going, state the advantages of that, compare it to the other using figures at all time. Now, I hope this series of short video clips broken into 4 different sections has helped you in how to answer these questions. If you look in the memo, you will see how the marks are actually allocated. And so you can see what you need to write. You can't just put one-word answers for marks that are ranging from 8 until 12 marks. You've got to be justifying all the time. And in your justification, always quoting ratios and percentages. Many learners do well in this type of section, but they can all push their marks up by just remembering to totally qualify what you're saying by using the trends and quoting the percentages. Now, if you go back into the study guide, you'll find there are many more questions like this. You can practice them, you can refer to the memos, and if you are unsure, ask your teachers to help you, or you can go onto the web, onto the questions and answer, and you can ask for our assistance. But again, good luck, but you need practice in everything you're doing.